My name is Warren Warren. My research group at Duke uses lasers to image materials in ways that produce much more information than you could get from just a camera or a normal microscope image. Much of the novelty comes from techniques we've developed over the years to control laser beams with exquisite precision. An ordinary laser produces essentially a lump of light, but our technologies sculpt the light into waveforms where the amplitude, the color, and the polarization can change in much less than a picosecond, which is a millionth of a second. That is cool and fun physics, but it isn't the end goal. The importance of our work lies in the applications. I'll talk about two of them here. First, we work with dermatologists, pathologists, and surgical oncologists to improve early diagnosis of melanoma, detecting metastatic cancer before it is visible by current clinical methods. Second, we use exactly the same laser system to non-invasively study pigments, for example in centuries-old paintings, to see degradation, understand the artist's original intent, and guide conservation. Let's start with melanoma. This is the most dangerous form of skin cancer, killing 8,000 Americans every year, largely because the cancer is often not detected until it becomes metastatic, and in cancer it's almost always the metastases that kill. Someone my age might have hundreds of small colored spots on the skin. The dermatologist's job is to use her skills to detect which ones are abnormal. The rule is always, when in doubt, cut it out. After the mole is cut out or excised, it is sliced, stained, and examined by pathology. In really severe cases, they also cut out a lymph node to see if pigmented cells have invaded the lymphatic system. After that, a stage is assigned, as is done with every other kind of cancer. If they don't detect metastases, you get sent home after a wider excision. Take 2 aspirin and call me in 6 months. The problem is, about 15% of the time, you actually had metastatic cancer that the doctors did not detect. Metastatic melanoma was a death sentence 20 years ago, but huge progress has been made in treatment in the last decades, largely with drugs you see advertised on TV all the time. However, these treatments are costly, which is why you see them on TV, and have side effects. Some people die from the drugs, so you can't just give them to everyone. The consequence is that more Americans die every year after a stage 1 diagnosis, which is more common, than after a stage 4 diagnosis. Now let's talk a bit about another application. The Mona Lisa has dozens of layers of slightly colored paint on her face. Long before we really understood optics, Da Vinci understood empirically the importance of scattering and three-dimensional structure in realistic art. Matisse's Joy of Life is the painting that inspired Picasso to develop what we now call Cubism and Modernism. Note the distorted figures and the shocking colors, most notably cadmium yellow, which was new at the time. Major areas of this painting which were yellow originally are now brown or white. This degradation problem became worse with the advent of beautiful organic pigments a century and a half ago. Impressionist artists such as Van Gogh knew this. But he only sold 1 painting in his lifetime, and he wasn't painting for us. Here is a best guess as to a restoration, done in part by a collaborator of ours at the National Gallery of Art. Understanding this degradation, and preferably figuring out how to slow it down, are the reasons why every major painting in the world is studied with scalpels, removing cross-sections for detailed analysis. Pump probe laser microscopy addresses both of these problems. Controlled laser pulses, using only 1/10 of the average power of a laser pointer, can make normally invisible molecular processes detectable and give a very richly structured image, even if the pigment itself is boring in its color. By sorting out these mechanisms, we extract extra information. Here's an example of a conventional microscope picture of a slice from a known metastatic melanoma. The dots are all melanin, the primary pigment in tissue, and they look pretty similar. With pump probe microscopy, the story is completely different. You see this tissue is actually very heterogeneous. It has lots of underlying structure. More importantly, and surprisingly, specific combinations of colors and delays highlight substantial differences in our images that correlate with clinical concern. That means we can find many, or maybe all, of the patients who were misdiagnosed with early-stage tumors to send them to treatments that in those cases would decrease cost because you're treating them early and save lives. Here's an artwork example. Most of the churchgoers of the 14th century were illiterate, but they still knew the lady in blue was the Virgin Mary. Her gown is colored with lapis lazuli, the most expensive Renaissance pigment, costlier than gold. When we image through her gown, again using much less power than a laser pointer, we see the layered structure, detect the rough grains from manual processing, and see impurities in the natural paint. We've done many other applications with both organic and inorganic pigments, usually with the goal of understanding original intent or aiding in conservation. As you've probably guessed, this is an intensely collaborative undertaking and reflects the kind of interdisciplinary challenges Duke tries hard to address. It's only possible because of an outstanding team and funding from public and private sources. Thank you for listening.